Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too want to stand in support of this motion. And I want to start again. We've heard a quote from Erskine May. I just want to set the stage with a different quote, and that is the classic definition of parliamentary privilege, which is found in Erskine May's treatise on the law, privileges, proceedings, and usage of parliament. And I start the quote here. Parliamentary privilege is the sum of certain rights enjoyed by each house collectively and by members of each house individually, without which they could not discharge their functions. I want to repeat that part, without which they could not discharge their functions, and which exceed those possessed by other bodies or individuals, end of quote. So asking questions on behalf of the people of Guyana, who we are elected to represent, is a parliamentary privilege, Mr. Speaker. These proposed amendments force us to discuss a fundamental in our parliamentary responsibility. And that is, we've heard it this morning, even from the other side, the ability to scrutinize the work and decisions of the executive on behalf of the people of Guyana, which we have been elected to do. The ability to ask questions ensures we inform, educate the people on key decisions made in this House that impact on the development and future of the same citizens who put us here to represent them, ensuring transparency and accountability. Mr. Speaker, as a parliament, we've been an abysmal failure in how we've handled the presentation of motions and the importance of ministers being accountable to the parliament and the people in terms of a timely response to questions. As we just heard from the Honorable Member Sarabo's presentation, in other jurisdictions, answers are provided, or a commitment to provide an answer is given within as low as 2 days and as high as five days. So, Mr. Speaker, in any part of the world, we assume that a parliament's willingness to answer any question that citizens or member of parliament may have would be something that you want to endorse, something you want to support. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that on January 20th, I submitted 12 questions on the Gas to Shore project. And just to stress the importance of this project, I want to refer to an oil gas report. I have it here for the record if necessary, which quotes the Honorable Guyana Prime Minister, who, and the headline says, Guyana Prime Minister pegs cost of gas to shore energy project at 1.8 billion US dollars. 1.8 billion US dollars. And Mr. Speaker, 12 questions are asked on the 20th of January on this very important 1.8 billion US dollar project. And Mr. Speaker, a response was given 27 days later. And I want to read what that response said. If you listen, Honorable Member, you will see what that response was. So the questions were posed on the 20th of January, and on the 3rd of March, I received a written response to my questions which were submitted. And here is the response. His Honor the Speaker has asked me to inform you that the information you sought by way of questions dated the 20th of January, was supplied by Mr. Winston Brassington, head of the Guyana Gas to Energy Task Force, in the Daily Chronicle and Stabrook News of the 16th of February. So what I'm showing you is that from the 20th of January to the 16th of February, the people of Guyana and all of us were not entitled to a response and to be educated on those critical issues on a $1.8 billion gas project. And this is precisely why we're saying, in good stead and in good faith, that we could do better as a parliament in terms of how we are educating our population on key issues and key questions that they are asking. So I want to highlight that when that question was asked on the 20th of January, there was nothing in the public domain that answered the questions precisely. And so this parliament waited 27 days to more or less brush me and my questions off. And this is precisely why we're debating this moment. At a minimum, within 4 days, an indication as to where your questions would stand is something that I would think that we can consider. And the thing that we keep missing is, what is the perception that is created everywhere in the public domain when for more than 26 days you are unable to answer key questions? Mr. Speaker, the standing orders quite rightly say, and I quote, that the Speaker shall be the sole judge. And Mr. Speaker, we support that. I endorse the role that you play. Mr. Speaker, we hold you to a high standard. Guyana expects you to be strong in your independence. What would have been so terrible in forwarding those critical questions for answer? Even if at a minimum, we were just ensuring that all Guyanese could remember the exact answers as proffered by the Honorable Prime Minister, who is in charge of the sector, or just to ensure we were continuing the process of educating and informing people. Mr. Speaker, can't we work together on something as basic as this? Providing credible information. So, Mr. Speaker, I think I've explained the spirit in which the questions were asked and the high anticipation that there would have been answers that the Prime Minister himself would have presented to those critical answers. Mr. Speaker, I want to go to another aspect that's very, very close and is part of the same contents of questions. And I want to quote 21A. The proper object of a question is to obtain information on a question of fact within the official cognizance of the minister to whom it is addressed or asked for official action. So that's why we ask in the question. We want the man or woman in charge to answer. I want to take us to subsection K in that same section on the contents of questions. And K says, a question shall not be asked as to whether statements in the media or of private individuals or bodies or persons are accurate. And that is understandable. We can't ask a person in authority, say a minister, to have to answer questions made by the media or a private individual that happen to be in the public domain. Mr. Speaker, the flip side of that would be to ask the public or a sitting member of parliament to go to a newspaper article, which is a report by a member of the media of a specific report of a specific group of information. In this case, it was information presented on the oil and gas industry, but they were quoting not the minister. You're quoting a third person and saying the reporter, the media reported is actually accurate and gospel. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I hope that I've shown the flaw in this situation. I hope that I've shown that 27 days is insufficient time, is way too long to have no response. And then to get a response that says, no, I'm sorry, read the public newspaper, especially when we have every day persons that say that what was reported as them saying, in fact, was not so. And that is not only for the Chronicle, but all newspapers. And therefore, I think the ethical and the action that should have been taken with humility is that the question should have been presented, the Honorable Prime Minister answer, and people be better informed. Reason I would like to suggest, and I endorse the recommendations of this motion, that 4 days is enough time to say what the position of these questions and what the results could be. Answering questions is a parliamentary privilege, and it is there to inform and educate us all. I hope we can get support for this. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me start off by joining my colleagues in wishing the Minister, Vikram, happy birthday. You are a leader for the side of the house, boss. We now blushes over here. Mr. Speaker, I stand here in support of the motion moved by my honorable colleague, Ganesh Mai Paul. Sir, this motion is simple, and it's simply seeking to bring some sort of conformity, structure, understanding to the process of submissions of motions in the time frame and questions in the time frame for the turnaround of these motions, sir. It has no hidden agenda. It's simply seeking, Mr. Speaker, so that we can ensure that the business of this House can be done in a structured manner. And I like to give the members, I mean, obviously not in here, but the members of the public listening, reasons why we on this side of the House think that such a motion and approval of such a motion would be of benefit to this Parliament. Mr. Speaker, in October of 2021, Sir, I submitted a motion on the shore basis, the question of location of shore basis and those things like that. No, so a motion. I submitted, honorable member, not a question. I submitted a motion to be debated on October of 2021. Sir, the motion is, I mean, I know the honorable member, and I'll go on to show, sir, I don't know, I was particularly singled out, I don't know, for whatever reasons. Sir, the motion took 80 days to be approved, and 81 to be debated. I asked every 2 weeks, and exactly as the honorable member said, you would ask the parliamentary staff, can I have the status of the motion? And they would very meekly and humbly reply, it's with the Speaker. I have forwarded to the Speaker for his response. You asked the Speaker, and unfortunately, though, we have one of the busiest speakers in the Commonwealth. He's always traveling. So when you, so
thank you very much. It's a demanding job.
yes, obviously, and you were enlightened that the Speaker is a part-time job. So the extra time is spent traveling, promoting, of course, the Parliament of Guyana. Today, the Speaker was traveling, and there was no response. When, so, yeah, of course not, we don't want to we don't want to disturb the Speaker's trip. We reach so infrequently, said nothing could disturb it. Sir, when the Speaker was eventually approached, and I'm telling, I'm only using these as background for the public to understand why such a motion would be. When the Speaker was approached, he said, sir, it's been 50, 60 days. He says he had responded to the clerks, he responded to the Parliament. Sorry, I'm here in front of you, sir. You could stop me anytime I misspoke anything that you say. And when he said, oh dear, it's now back with the Parliament. The Parliament said no. Eventually, sir, we found out the mistake was a human mistake. The Speaker had responded to the clerk in an email, but forgot to press send. So it was in his draft folder. And the Speaker said it was in his draft folder. 80 days on a very important matter. The day before the day, and this is what the public has to know, the day before it was debated the day before the budget. So Saturday, of course, we went here till 4 in the morning. The motion was defeated, and the next day was in the budget, and the government put in $43 billion for the project. And sir, I'm not assuming anything nefarious about it, but it's very strange, the coincidence of what happened, sir. So the motion is simply saying, let us have a timeline. So therefore, at the end of the expiration, the 4th day, 10th day, the 15th day, somebody could say to the Speaker or to the clerk, you haven't responded. And they can check their draft folders and their emails and press send. That's all. So there are timelines, so therefore people can obviously be. So when the timelines come are hit, something happens. Sir, to leave it open-ended, sir, will suffer the fate in which I did, sir. But that's not the only one, sir. I submitted a motion, a question. Yes, a question, October 18th, 2022. On the Wales gas shore. Of course, I shadowed the oil industry. It took 36 days for approval. This time, sir, it wasn't an issue of no one wants to press it. It was simply an issue of nothing. Absolutely nothing from the Parliament, absolutely nothing from anyone. And sir, what the reason that we're doing here, the reason we're bringing this motion is we don't fall into these things. They've got the timeline. Sir, we know you're a busy man. We know that Parliament clerk, of course, they're full time, so therefore the time constraints here. Sir, insurance motions are submitted on insurance, sir. It took 36 days. 36 days, sir. And after it was surgically dissected several times, it made it onto the order paper. And of course, there's an issue. There's an issue between being published as a notice paper and debated. That's quite something. Sir, that is not acceptable for a country, sir, that is deemed to be the fastest growing economy in the world, where questions submitted on behalf of the people of Guyana and motions can take 3 months. And Ferguson spoke about 6 months. Sir, most times, and I'm not opposing it, most times when we query this, and of course I have finance, I send emails, I don't ring, so I like to back. Most times when we query this, the response has always been, it's with the Speaker. You have to pick this up with the Speaker. Sir, we're not accusing anyone. Sir, we know that there is a saying, but I know, sir, there's a saying that a bad workman blames his tools. Sir, all this motion is seeking to do is ensure that you, Mr. Speaker, and the Parliament have better tools so that the blame can be reduced. Sir, several members of civil society, in particular a group, Red Thread, and a group of female activists, as I shouted on that, have asked us, me in particular, to submit questions to the Parliament, sir, because they would have submitted these questions to all the ministries, including the ministry headed by my good friend who's celebrating his birthday today. Several questions, sir. I'm copying on them. These questions are submitted almost on a daily basis. So the Office of the Prime Minister, the Office, the Vice President, EPA, Exxon, EEPGL, sir, and not one of these questions that they would have submitted was answered, not even responded to, right? That's outside the Parliament. And as a last resort, sir, and as a last resort, they've asked if myself and some other members can raise it in Parliament. And unfortunately, we had to say, I said to them, it's almost a fruitless effort, because by the time your questions get in, by the time the Parliament, and I must for the record say this here before anyone in the Parliament staff comes to me afterwards and says that they're not doing the job. They acknowledge receipt within 24 hours. The Parliament staff acknowledges receipt within 24 hours of your submission. And I must commend them for that. So there's the 4 hours, the 4 days proposed by Honorable Member, my boss, does not even account for the Parliament staff. Within 24 hours, they acknowledge receipt. Sir, so the blame, the 4 hours, we don't have to put a timeline in for the Parliament staff, sir. The timeline obviously lies elsewhere. And I've said to them, it is a fruitless effort. That our Speaker is a wise and busy man. He has several issues which he has to contemplate, and they're addressing the bothersome motions at times from persons, particularly from myself. I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues. I don't want to speak to them. Maybe it's not a priority. What we're seeking to do here is obviously not make it a priority, but make it in such that there is a notation in the Speaker, and I must commend him for this as well. I must commend him. I'm remiss if I don't miss him. He is a fella like me that likes electronic. Yes, he does everything online, and I commend you for that. Little tag online, which would be called a reminder. So if we pass this motion and the Parliament staff gives you something today, automatically sets a reminder in 4, 5, 6 days, so that you would know, pops up on your screen at the beginning of the day, wherever part of the world you are, that you are supposed to respond by. So and if the motion contemplates, sir, if you're too busy or the Parliament is too busy, we're engaged in budgetary debates or something like that, you can notify the mover of the motion or the submitter of the question that we are busy this moment, we require additional time. Sir, the 4 days is just simply for you to acknowledge and respond. Sir, if the proposed timelines is deemed restrictive, sir, and I said it wouldn't be restricted for the Parliament staff, because they respond within 24 hours. It would not. So if it is deemed restricted for the other persons that have to look at it and approve, the government, sir, and with your suggestion, your guidance, like you've been always great at guiding them so far in this 12th Parliament, you've guided them along the absolutely correct path, always ensure that they stayed along this correct path. You can, with your suggestions, or you can always suggest an alternative. If 4 days is too short, too restrictive, Like honorable member that it is set out, if it falls on Good Friday and those things like that. We don't count holidays, but never mind. We're contemplating 4 working days. You can, sir, suggest an alternative timeline. However, in doing nothing, sir, in us as a collective doing nothing, shows that we're not progressing. It shows that as a parliament, we're not even, sir, you, one of the initiatives I know that you have been championing is the e-parliament, and I endorse that. But what is the use of e-parliament without structure and timeline? So the objective of e-parliament obviously become more efficient. The more efficient requires timelines and milestones and guidelines. And so this, your support and maybe your nudging of the government side support for motion like this, probably is the first cog in the wheel to us achieving your e-parliament ambitions. So I urge the members on the other side of the house not to simply look at this as a motion that has any other hidden agenda. It's simply bringing some structure and timeline to the process. So with those few words, I like to endorse the motion, and I trust when the next speaker gets up on the opposition side, she will propose an alternative date if the 4 days are too restrictive, and we can all unanimously agree. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And happy birthday, Barack. I want to just read a note on the standing orders, the most recent edition which I have, which indicates that standing orders are not written stone. They're subject to review. They're subject to amendments, especially when those amendments will enforce and ensure an efficacy to the work that we do here. And the standing orders of the National Assembly, and I'm reading, were amended in 2011 by the Special Select Committee in the report of the draft standing orders. Members worked assiduously in conducting meetings over a 4-year period, where they carefully considered making deletions, insertions, and also ensuring that the language is gender neutral. On 25th of July 2011, the report of the draft standing orders was adopted by the National Assembly. Further amendments were made thereafter, July and December 2012, to these standing orders. Mr. Speaker, on matters of questions put to ministers and motions by the opposition, you are the gatekeeper. That is an important point in every Westminster type democracy. You are the gatekeeper as to whether the question is qualified to be put on the table, and of course, when a motion is to be put. And what we have is that an open-ended sort of arrangement was granted drafting in 2011 because we were informed, and I recall this because I was a member of the standing committee, that there is a convention that speakers are going to ensure that questions and motions from the opposition are heard as expeditiously as possible, and if they do not qualify, that disqualification will come very early. Because, indeed, rules in this honorable, noble assembly are generally sometimes best made and left unwritten. It is necessarily so because not only of historical reasons in which We took our methods from, which has by practices and procedures and so on that are largely unwritten, written in a book by Erskine May. And so it is in that context then, whereby being the gatekeeper and having a convention that you will deal with matters expeditiously, it was left open-ended as it is in the standing orders 22, 23, and 27. What we have seen, and that is just like the law, whenever you see certain things occurring in the law or any other institution that requires timeliness in decision-making or time dealing with an issue, you then can come and change or amend or insert a new amendment. And what Mr. Mahipal is doing here is simply the fact that it, as Mr. David Patterson just mentioned, a matter took 8 days to be determined. And we all know you're a very busy man. I know that you're a very busy man. It is important that we now ensure for future parliaments that a time period be granted, not necessarily for the answering of the question, Mr. Speaker. This is for you to make a determination whether the question and motion is qualified or not. And if it is so qualified, that you place it on the order paper. 4 days. So once indeed it is known that the clerk has received the question or motion, within a 4-day period thereafter, it should be then, and it is sent to you, and we know that conventionally the clerk operates pretty efficaciously. He would send it to you within probably hours or a day. You then must ensure that you make the determination that this matter should be then ruled on as to whether it's qualified or not. And if so qualified, that it be put on the table. Timelines in view of our little history in this 12th Parliament are needed. And we can see that it is needed because whenever a question or a motion comes up, it is because the maker of that question or the person questioning or the person making the motion, the mover of the motion, by virtue of his politics on the ground, see that it is necessary. It is topical at that point in time. And the reason why he or she then asks the question or moves the motion. When then you have a delay that can be extensive in it not even being tabled or the decision not being known whether it is disqualified, there is a certain disadvantage that mover of the motion or asker of the question is put into. And especially now, since we are a representative democracy, the people who might have urged the question or motion are then not in a position, but until some 80 days after, to make the point, to know that indeed it was disqualified. Or it is, just please. It is something that is, what I am trying to get at is the uncertainty. There is. You would know this, Mr. Speaker, because indeed you were a parliamentarian too that wanted questions to be answered by ministers. I was there with you. You had moved motions too. And as far as I can recall, those were done expeditiously. In view of the fact that it is not being done expeditiously, and we are not in any way denigrating you as a speaker. We are simply saying that in accordance with the evolution of our parliament development, that it is necessary now that we put in a deadline period. And deadline periods are necessary. I remember when being in the Parliament in 2009, our constituents, and even at that time the government's constituents, had indicated that judges are taking a long time to write their decisions. They hear the trial, they take all the evidence, and then nothing happens for long periods of time. And, we then went to Parliament in 2009 and passed the time limit, can't recall the correct name, Time Limit for Judicial Decisions Act 2009. Yes, Judicial Time Limits for Judicial Decisions Act, I think it was 2009. And we indicated that once the trial is completed in the High Court, within 160 days, I think it was, there must be a decision. At the Court of Appeal level, we indicated that it must be, I think, 30 days after arguments are heard that you must do that. Why? Because we wanted expeditiousness about our decision making. And the expeditiousness is a fundamental pillar because decisions affect people's lives. In the case of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, it affects the parties. It affects precedents because we want them as early as possible. In this case, we want to know the answers to questions as early as possible. So the people that got the answer must know that the thing is laid on the table there. We should, yeah. In this case, where we are asking via Mr. Mahipal through this motion that it be done in a 4-day period after you would have gotten it as to whether it's disqualified or not, is fundamental because there can't be any delays or any uncertainties because in 4 days you would have made a ruling. If indeed it is disqualified, it is disqualified. Well, we could come again with some amendments, or you could amend it as you have done with a couple of my questions. And then it's proceeded with. Then, of course, we would expect the convention that ministers ought to, as within a short time as possible, as our kind mayor said. In England, it's about 2 days, 3 days. They got to answer because the thing is topical. Why are you going to wait 80 days or more or 40 days when it is not topical? That is not democracy. The people out there would like to know the answer now. And if the representative of the people find that indeed it is, then there should be a quick answer to the question as possible. So there is nothing, as was said by Mr. Sanjeev Dattadin, and I must say that it is rather weak submissions he made, very tenuous, that we will not suffer at the whim and fancy of the opposition by asking for a 4-day. The entire tenor and intent of this has been missed by him completely. And the whole point of it is that indicating that we are doing damage to democracy. If it is anything, just like the conventions in England and other Commonwealth countries that indicate that, yes, a speaker will do it in a very quick time, make the decision, and thereafter the minister will be allowed a quick time to answer, or the motion will be given time in Parliament to be debated, like this one. It is all for the strengthening of democracy. And that extraordinarily robust period that we had during the 2002 period, with all those basic needs for parliamentary, the 2 Englishmen that came, you know that period, sir. This is what we did when we drafted and strengthened the standing orders. It was clearly to strengthen scrutiny. Scrutiny for our people. When opposition members ask questions, it is done so entirely to scrutinize government. And a government that wants scrutiny must understand that it enhances the democracy and accountability and the transparency. And so I cannot understand when he indicated that we are not going to suffer the women fancy of the opposition when they ask for 4 days. And very untypical, a very good lawyer, he gives the impression as if the holidays must come tonight. Come on, I didn't understand that because he knows holidays don't come. But whatever it is, Mr. Speaker, this is but something that will assist us in knowing answers, getting information. And you know why too? Because we got a commissioner of insurance. And it is a notorious fact that indeed we don't get answers from the commissioner of information. I said insurance. Commissioner of that appeal, no? But it is important. And we don't get. I have asked personally questions for answers by my good friend, Mr. Ben, because I speak here also for public security. Scrutiny. Yeah, well, I can ask. Or I am also a member that could ask any question. Any member could ask any question. And the other aspect of the matter that I want to bring is scrutiny is so important that we then also had created in that 2002 period something called the Public Security Sector Reform Committee, Public Security Parliamentary Committee, whereby questions could be asked, and if they feel that the answers are sensitive, we ought to get them in that committee. That committee has not been set up. So it seems like we don't want scrutiny. 3 years now, we name the people from the opposition and the government who will sit in that committee, and no meeting thereafter has been. Why this escape from transparency and scrutiny and questioning and cross-examination and all of that? And why after the convention says, when I'm going through Erskine May, generally when you have these committees formed, parliamentary committees, within a reasonable time, because they give you a little space, they must become operational. They must become operational. What do we have here in relation to a parliamentary scrutiny committee? Nothing. We can't even ask Mr. May Thomas anything about all that has happened recently. But you know what? When we were in government, they called Mr. Silal Prasad.
But, honorable member, persons who are not in the House to represent themselves, you should name them. So there are two names here.
We had questions coming from the ministers then, the opposition then. Mr. Harry Gill, Madam Gil Teixeira. If you see questions that came to me, all right, we're going to form this committee. We form it, and for 3 years or whatever, questions asked. Okay, well, what's your policy on crime? Okay, come, Mr. Silal Prasad, and he gave everything. Oh, well, what are your plans on prison? Everything. So the scrutiny that is a bulwark of democracy was done. And so to that extent, then I'm saying that, and it was done very expeditiously. We formed the committee and all of that. So whenever now we got problems in security issue, we simply do not have even that, what is called, in-camera method by which we could get the answers. You know, we can't. And so, and I'm pleading again publicly here, Mr. Ben, convene meetings and let us start getting operational that public security sector committee. I want to say that in this standing orders, we got timelines. Timelines is not a new thing. I want to add this point to what I have made before. I have gone through the standing orders hundreds of times, and I can recall that there's a 1 month period sometimes we put timelines. Was it not only recently when we had that select committee whereby something is going into the select committee? 1 month. 1 month we got to go to the select committee and come back here. They put a timeline. Single window bill. And we have had timelines of 6 days written into this standing order, from the first reading of a bill to the second reading of a bill. I think 6 days. Why timeline? It is because for efficacy, effectiveness, and the fact that timeliness, it is very, very important. And so there shouldn't be something that's asking for a 4 days period to know where we stand, whether the question is disqualified or not, or whether it should come with an amendment, and so on. What is wrong about a timeline being put when the conventions in Erskine may say it must be at a most short or reasonable time, to the extent of, in that country, ministers are asked off the bat sometime questions, 2-3 days, because of the topicality that is the nature of question. And so I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't have a government that is aiding and abetting delays to answers to questions or to motions. If this government practices what it preaches, we're going to get support for this motion. Because they have done it with judges, they have done it here with putting timelines and all of that. And so we must have indeed support for this motion for the reasons that I have just mentioned. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.